him as good as dead, were born descendants as many as the stars of heaven, and as many as the innumerable grains of sand by the seashore. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on earth. For people who speak thus make it clear that they are seeking a homeland. God told Abraham, we talked about this a little bit last week, but we're going to be still talking about Abraham here in a minute, so I want to recap just a little bit. God told Abraham to go not knowing where he was going. And it talks about the faith. Abraham's called the father of the faith. And God told Abraham, you pack up all your belongings, you gather up all your family, and you just go, and I'll let you know when you get there. Man, that takes faith, huh? One, you got to know the voice of God. You got to have discernment. There's a whole lot of people, oh, now I'm going to get sidetracked. There's a whole lot of people who think everything's God. There's a whole lot of people who think every voice is God. There's a whole lot of people who say, well, God told me this, and God told me that. And I get all kinds of people that come up to me and tell me, God told me this, you should do this, Pastor. Well, when God tells me to do that, I'll do it. Okay, but the Bible also says to test the spirits. If you got to know God and know the heart of God. And the only way that you get to do that is through your relationship with Him. Through communion with Him, through reading the Word, through prayer. And as you grow closer to Him, then you'll discern and you'll know the voice of God. And what's the voice of yourself, mainly? But there's voices of demons, too. Everybody wants to blame things on demons, too. You're deceitfully wicked, but you got a wicked heart. Amen? God made these promises to Abraham. First, He told him, pack up and go. He told him, I'm going to make your descendants as numerous as the stars. In his old age, He said, you're going to have a child. When he was past the age of having children, when Sarah was past the age of having children, Abraham believed when God spoke. Listen, when all things are possible with God, amen? And a lot of times when we look at impossible circumstances, but when you've prayed and you've got confirmation and you know the voice of God and you know what God says, then stand on those promises. Listen, my mom, I've told this story a lot, but I'll tell it again. Like I said, I'll tell the same stories, but that's all right. My mom, when I was a little child, there was a woman in her church that she knew heard from God, and she knew operated in the gift of prophecy. She had spoken words over people's life and they had come true, and it had been time and time again. And this woman spoke over me when I was a child that I was going to be a preacher at 2 years old. And you know what? My mom held on to that word. My mom held on to that word when I was on drugs. My mom held on to that word when I was in prison. She held on to that word when I was in my rebellion. All of that. She knew what God had said. Amen? And she believed what God had said. And she held on to that. Abraham believed, and it was accounted to him righteousness. He was looking for an eternal promise. He had problems when he was in Egypt, problem in Sodom, problem with Hagar and Ishmael. But you know what? Abraham kept going. As imperfect as it was, he held on to his faith and he kept going. I love the accounts of the people in the Bible because you can see their humanity. You see all their failures. You see all the times that they fell short when Abraham and Sarah decided, well, we're just going to try to go ahead and help God out. And it didn't work out so well. But the Bible still counts him as righteous because he heard from God and he believed God. There's going to be times when you're going to miss the mark. And there's going to be times when you don't get it quite right. But as imperfect as it was, he walked in faith. Abraham never gave up. And he continued to trust God. I'm going to read verses 13 and 14 again. So that was everything we read last week. These all died in faith, not having received the things promised, but having seen them and greeted them from afar, and having acknowledged that they were strangers and exiles on the earth. We'll stop right there for a minute. It says they died in faith, not having received the things promised. Abel, Noah, Abraham died in faith. Noah's life and his family's life were preserved through the ark, were they not? What did God promise him? That he was going to preserve his life through the ark. So he received part of the promise. Amen? A pretty big part, if you're Noah especially, or Shem or Ham, right? Noah's life and his family's life were saved, but he never saw the full scope. Listen to this now. He never saw the full scope of what his obedience would accomplish. Not in his earthly life. Let me tell you something, church. You will probably never see the full scope of what you walking in faith and walking in obedience will accomplish in generations to come. Abraham would never see his descendants be as numerous as the stars in the sky or the grains of sand in the sea, not in his earthly life. Would he see that? Yes, he had kids and grandkids, and God blessed him and all those other things, but the whole nation was birthed out of Abraham. Israel was birthed out of Abraham. The Messiah was birthed out of Abraham. He never saw the fullness of what his obedience accomplished. They saw some of the promise, but not the fullness. We have to think about the generations ahead.